Well, hello. So in this video, we're going to be doing extra practice module 60, and this is all about how in perfect competition, eventually they'll return to a long run equilibrium, which means they earn normal profit or zero economic profit. So this is an idea that we kind of learned about in actually the last unit when we were talking about perfect competition, and we extended it in this unit. So this is some good practice. So the first question is, check your understanding number one, and it says in each of the following events will it induce firms to enter or to exit the industry, and then when will it cease, and explain your answer. And so this is really just saying like when will firms be earning a profit or a loss, because like if firms are earning a profit, then other firms will enter, and if firms are losing money, then firms will exit, right? And then once they reach that equilibrium is when that process will stop. So part A says a technological advance lowers the fixed cost of production of every firm in the industry. And so for that one, right, so we'd say that they have profit initially because their costs are now lower, right? So that's kind of the thinking process, is think about, is there going to be profit or is there going to be loss? And the reason is there's going to be profit because the costs are lower. And so then we'd say entry, right? New firms will enter until, right, the price equals the ATC again. And so basically that supply curve will shift to the right, and that's because firms are entering. And as the supply curve shifts to the right, the price is going to keep going down and down and down until it meets that cost curve that's now a little bit lower, as the problem said. So part B says the wages paid to workers go up for an extended period of time. Now, you have to remember, back to unit one, we talked about wages are costs for firms, right? They're the biggest cost for most firms, is what you have to pay your workers. And so if the wages are going up, then we'd say the costs are going up. And so we'd say that means that firms are probably going to lose money. And so we'd see some firms exit until, right, the price equals the ATC. Now, this process, the firm exit process, will mean the supply curve goes down. It decreases, right? In the market, the number of firms will decrease, and so supply decreases and the price goes back up, right? So the price is going to go up when the supply decreases. And so then eventually that high price will reach that high cost again. Part C, a permanent change in consumer tastes increases demand for the good. So in this case, you're getting more demand, and so we're seeing higher prices for the product, and so firms will be earning a profit, right? It's not changing the cost side, it's actually changing the price side, which is kind of nice for the firm, so they're earning a profit. So we would see firms entry until, right, price equals ATC. Part D says the price of a key input rises due to a long-term shortage of that input. And that one is pretty clearly like, the costs are going to be higher. And so firms will exit, and we'd say until the price ATC. Okay. Question 2 says, assume that the egg industry is perfectly competitive and is in a long-run equilibrium with a perfectly elastic long-run industry supply curve. And one thing I'm going to tell you is that there's some questions in this problem set about industry supply curves. And that's just a fancy way of saying like the supply curve in the market. And then they say like a long run industry supply curve. And that's beyond the scope of this class. So this module includes some information that's really not necessary for you to understand. But it does tell you perfectly elastic long run industry supply curve. And I'll explain what that means in a second. So it says health concerns about cholesterol then lead to a decrease in demand, right? So it's in equilibrium, and then there's a decrease in demand. And then it says construct a figure similar to figure 60.3, showing the short run behavior of the industry and how long run equilibrium is reestablished. So let's go look at what does that figure actually look like. And so in this figure, you kind of see the market in the middle here and the two firms on the left and the right. I think it's the same firm, actually. It's just the initial increase in demand and then the response to new entrants. And that's just saying how do they change where they're producing. So in this picture, it looks really scary. You can see that the long run industry supply curve is this thing that's a horizontal line. And that's basically, when they say it's perfectly elastic, it just means it's a horizontal line. It means that like when the firms are responding to each other and you have like more demand, and then they increase their production in response to that, and then firms decide to enter, what the idea of this long run industry supply curve in short means is that when those new firms enter, in certain circumstances, like in the real world, they're going to be bidding for the same inputs, right? So like if you have lots of new companies opening up in an industry, it's likely that they're basically all competing for the same inputs to make the product. And so that would drive up the input costs and make it more expensive. And that actually is a pretty realistic phenomenon. In order to kind of model that, you have this thing called a long run industry supply curve. And if the long run industry supply curve is kind of tilted upwards, that means it's increasing. That reflects the idea that it's more expensive as more firms enter, it's more expensive to produce because they're bidding up the costs. All of that is to say is that for this class, all of the industry supply curves will be a horizontal line, and we'll just kind of ignore the effect of new firms entering on the price of the inputs. So you don't have to worry about like a long run industry supply curve that's not a horizontal line. And there are some examples of it like in here somewhere, and that you don't need to stress about, so I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah, like here's an example of one. Don't worry about that stuff. If it's talking about long run industry supply curves, you can just kind of assume it's this horizontal line and that we just go from one point to another. So let's go back to our problem here and say we've got this egg industry, right? And make sure we label our axes price and quantity. And we're going to start with demand and supply. And it looks like something like that. And they're in a long run equilibrium, blah, 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 right? So we go from like Q star, P star. And it says health concerns about cholesterol then lead to a decrease in demand. Okay, so if there's a decrease in demand, right, this is, you go from like point A to point B. Shouldn't be too hard so far. And then it says, you know, in the long run, what's going to happen? Well, we know that with this like lower price, the initial lower price, firms are going to be losing money because they were in equilibrium. So that means they were at normal profit before, and now that means they're experiencing losses. So as they experience losses, firms are going to exit this market. Exit, get it? Okay. See, the jokes are much funnier like when it's a whole classroom of people. It's eggs and exit. Okay, whatever. So as firms are exiting, right, when that happens, I keep cracking myself up. I need another cup of coffee is what that means. This supply curve is going to shift to the left because there's fewer and fewer firms. And it will continue to shift to the left until we go back up to that price where the P star price. And so we'll actually shift this supply curve back over to here to point C is where we'll operate. So like we'll initially go to point B, we'll say that's like Q1, and that happens like in the short run and when the demand falls. And then as firms exit, there's going to be even less quantity, right, to Q2, but the price will go back up to where it was at P star, and that will reflect kind of the new long run equilibrium. So that's really all they're asking you to do there is show like what happens as the market corrects. Okay, let's take a look at some multiple choice questions here. Number one says, in the long run, a perfectly competitive firm, hopefully we know this, they'll earn a normal profit, and so that's D. That one's not too bad. Number two says, with perfect competition, efficiency is generally attained in, and we know that in the perfect competition, they're definitely always attained in the long run, but not necessarily in the short run, right? In the short run, we might have firms losing money and they might not be very efficient and they might not be allocated right. So productive efficiency isn't always maintained, whatever. So we're looking for definitely in the long run, but not necessarily in the short run. And so for that, we can say B. Number three, and this says compared to the short run industry supply curve, the long run industry supply curve will be more, we'll just say elastic. It's going to be a horizontal line, right? So remember, basically the assumption for this class will be, and I didn't talk about this in the lectures, so I'm going to take that question out. But if you do see questions about a long run industry supply curve, it's just saying like, imagine if you plotted a line that was just like right here where that price was, and you said that that's the long run supply curve. That's all it is. And so we'd say, look, it's more elastic than the other one. So A. Number four, which of the following is true for perfect competition? So number one says there's free entry and exit. We know that that's true, right? Man, my hair, this is, I just noticed that. Oh, I probably should have like combed my hair more. This is my COVID hair. We know that number one is true. Sorry, squirrel. Number two, long run market equilibrium is efficient. We know that that is also true because we learned about that in the previous video. Three, firms maximize profits at the output level where P equals MC. So Mr. DARP, right, price equals marginal revenue. So they definitely do that. So we would say all three of those are true statements. Number five, which of the following will happen in response if perfectly competitive firms are earning positive profit? Well, we know firms will enter in response to profit. So Firms will exit, no. The short run industry supply curve will shift right, no. Wait, hang on. The short run industry supply, so that's just saying this curve, right? That's this curve. This is the short run supply curve. And so if firms are entering, then that would happen because that curve would shift to the right. So, so B will be our answer because that's saying firms are entering the market. So B. Let's look at the other answers just to be clear. Otherwise, I probably did screw this up. Curve will shift left. No, that's the same as A. So A and C are the same answer. Firm output will increase. That's not true. So this is a little weird. If you think about it, there's more firms, right? And as there's more firms, they have the same size of the pie of quantity that they're producing. So each firm is actually going to get less and less of the pie as more firms join. So actually firm output will decrease, but the total market output will rise. We saw that actually when we looked at the videos with the lectures. Market price will increase. No, it's the other way around. As more firms are entering, the price is going to drop because there's more supply. Okay, let's take a look at free response number 2. Draw correctly labeled side-by-side graphs to show long-running adjustment that would take place if perfectly competitive firms were earning a profit. So we need a market and a firm. So 2 graphs, 1, 2. Both are going to have price and quantity on the axes. We'll put market and firm. And it tells us that the firm is earning a profit initially, and then there's going to be an adjustment. And so that means the price is probably going to be high because they're earning a profit. And so I'm going to actually start with my supply curve up here because the price is nice and high at P star. And we'll say Q star. And we know that they are a price taker. So they're just taking whatever that market price is. And we've got Mr. DARP over here. And then we've got a marginal cost curve. That's the firm's supply curve. And we were told explicitly that this, this firm, I'm just doing that's the quantity, MR equals MC. This firm is earning a profit, and all the firms have identical cost structures. That's kind of one of the assumptions we'll make with this, just to keep it simple. So if the firm's earning a profit, right, profit means price is greater than the ATC at Q star. And so what we need is to have an ATC line that's going to come down, hit its minimum, and come back up again. And note that here, the ATC is less than the price, Mr. DARP, the price. And so this firm's earning a profit. Now, it tells us that we want to show the long run adjustment. So basically the adjustment is that firms are going to enter, other firms. And so as for other firms enter, right, they're going to shift that supply curve to the right. It should have kind of done like that until you get to this level right here, where the long run entry and exit will stop. And how do we know that it's going to be here? Well, we will be in long run at price equals ATC. And so like you've got profit if the price is greater than the ATC. You're in the long run equilibrium if the price equals the ATC. And that's going to happen here. So we need to push this Mr. DARP line down. And so this is kind of working backwards, but you can see here I'm working backwards to find where should this new supply curve go. So this new supply curve is going to shift really far to the right as firms enter. So we go from point A to point B in the market, right? We've got way bigger quantity in the market. We've got way lower price in the market. But what happens over here? Well, the firm has less quantity. And that was exactly the story I was telling you a few minutes ago when it was, that each firm gets a smaller piece of the pie, even though the pie is getting bigger here, right? Q star to Q1, the individual firm is getting less and less, and that's because more firms are jumping into this market. We also note that the price falls that this firm receives. Okay, so hopefully that helped you. I'll see you next time.